All right, welcome back. We just left off with reading in the book of Exodus, chapter 16 and chapter 17, the two verses where the Israelites both thirsted and hungered, and they didn't have faith in God to provide for them, and they complained against God and Moses and Aaron. Now, my question to you is this not you? Is this not us? Don't we, just like the Israelites, don't we hunger and thirst for physical things of this life, the fleshly desires? And don't we, in our humanness, try to provide those things for ourselves, just as the Israelites seemingly tried to do? How uncomfortable and antsy it is for human beings to be in a situation where they don't see a solution right away. We as human beings, we don't like feeling uncomfortable. I think it's interesting in these scriptures to see how quickly the Israelites gave up on God, how quickly they turned against God, complained against God, because they lost faith. After all, He brought them out of 400 years of slavery, yet they doubted Him, doubted that He would provide the food and water they needed. But before you point fingers, before you judge the Israelites, you must realize that this is yet another comparison, another similarity between us and the Israelites. We do the exact same thing. We are just as guilty. We, a lot of times, complain against God. We rebel against God. We don't have the faith that God will provide our needs, for our needs. It's interesting that the Israelites, we know some of them even turned around and wanted to go back to Egypt and were willing to enslave themselves again because they thought they would be better off than depending on God and Moses and Aaron. And I just find that amazing. Yet, again, I think a lot of times we do the same thing. Now, perhaps the things that you and I hunger for and thirst for in this world are not bad in and of themselves. They may even be necessities such as food and water or clothes. And I think the important thing to realize is that this is more an issue of heart and faith. The Israelites didn't have faith. They complained. They rebelled because of their lack of faith. And I think that's exactly what we do. In fact, I'm sure of it. In fact, in Matthew 6, we are told, and this is a New Testament example, not to worry about a thing, because God cares about the sparrows, and if He cares about the sparrows, then He certainly is going to take care of us. So, and I think of this analogy. Think of this. When we're in our hunger and when we're in our thirst, so many times God is there and He has the cold ice, fresh glass of ice water, and He has nourishing bread, and He is sitting there offering it to us. Yet so many times in our stubbornness, in our sinfulness, in our lack of faith, we will pass that, and instead we will go for the things that the world offers and tells us will fulfill our need, our wants, whatever it may be for that situation. So many times we go for that. But many times that's a glass of salt water, which only dehydrates us more, or it's poisoned food, which only gets us obviously in worse shape, in a bad situation. And I think normally it's just a matter of we're too stubborn or we're too prideful, whatever it may be, to ask the Father what we need. And we're just reluctant to do that for whatever reason. I don't know about you, but it's also easy to get distracted, and the Israelites were very guilty of that. And they lost sight of the promised land. And And once we lose sight of the promised land, just as they did, we find ourselves wandering around, getting mixed up in all kinds of things that are not very good at all for us. We get distracted. We find ourselves off the beaten path, off the path that God intends. And then we end up finding ourselves in the same situation as the Israelites. One thing that we do, and they did, is create idols to worship. And I think we create idols to help us cope. We use that as an excuse. We think it's going to temporarily satisfy our pains, our situation that we're in, whatever it may be. I think subconsciously, even if it's subconsciously, we believe that is going to help us get through this journey here on earth, and we lose sight of the eternal picture. Now, obviously the Israelites, and I'm sure you're all aware that for them it was the golden calf. And let's read Exodus, this time skipping over to chapter 32, verses 1 and 4. Now when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." Now skipping ahead to 4, but I will say in verses 2 and 3, all that happens is Aaron instructs the people to gather up all their gold jewelry and bring it to him. And then going into verse 4, "And he received the gold from their hand, and he fashioned it with an engraving tool and made a molded calf. Then they said, 'This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of Egypt.'" Now what I find just really just sad here is not only did they create an idol, but then they give the idol credit for what God had done. Notice the last portion of verse 4. They say, "This golden calf is responsible for actually bringing us out of Egypt." And I think we actually do the same thing. Now, in America, I don't see a lot of golden calves around that we worship, and there are in other parts of the world. But here we have cars, we have houses, we have bank accounts, we have our pride, we have power. We have so many idols here, probably more so than the Israelites did or most of the world now has. Now, most Christians that even recognize that idolatry is wrong and idolatry is a problem, most Christians only realize the physical idols such as money or cars or houses. However, it's important to note here that idols can be in the form of ideals, thoughts, emotions, pleasures, and I think we really, as Christians, we really need to be aware of that. A.W. Tozer once said, "An idol of the mind is as offensive to God as an idol of the hand."